guys. So tonight we have to talk about cellular respiration, which is kind of a hard concept for me, but we're taking it all the way from glycolysis to the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. So the cellular respiration definition is a collection of reactions that extract energy from food using redox reactions and then transfer that energy into the bonds of ATP. This occurs through the combined efforts of glycolysis, the intermediate step, Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. What does that mean? So basically, we'll go through some of the definitions and that will kind of clarify what the steps are and what the process entails. First, the redox. It's reduction, which is actually an addition of an electron, which sounds backwards, but it's the charge that gets reduced with that addition of the electron versus the actual electron count. Or oxidation, which is losing atoms or ions. So the next step is glycolysis. That's the first stage of anaerobic or aerobic carbohydrate catabolism. This actually extracts the energy from carbohydrates, like starches, and the term literally means splitting sugar. So it's taking those carbohydrates and breaking them down to be able to use them for that energy through this process. The process takes 10 steps in 2 stages. There's the energy investment stage and then the payoff stage. This splits the carbon. There's 6 carbon glucose molecules into 3 carbon pyruvic acid molecules. So that is the glycolysis stage. The next step is the intermediate step, and that is where the pyruvic acid that's made in glycolysis is moved and converted to acetyl-CoA, which is a 2 carbon molecule releasing carbon dioxide. The next is the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle is a little more complicated. It's also called the citric acid cycle. So this is a series of redox, which we mentioned before is the reduction and oxidation process. So these reactions and the decarboxylation reactions where carbon dioxide is actually removed. So this produces some ATP, but the citric acid formed with this is the hardest word for me. Oxaloacetic acid and the acetyl-CoA is formed in the intermediate step. Produces some of the ATP, but the cofactors NADH and FADH2, which these are the real gems of the Krebs cycle. So those are the molecules that contain potential energy. This cycle runs for each acetyl-CoA molecule, so twice for every glucose molecule that enters glycolysis. So every time you have 2 glucose molecules or 1 glucose molecule, the Krebs cycle runs twice for each of those, extracting those extra factors. Finally, you have the electron transport chain. Let me back up. When they enter the glycolysis, each carbon for each glucose is formed into carbon dioxide, which naturally dissipates into the atmosphere. So that moves us into the electron transport chain. This carries out a coordinated redox reactions, transferring electrons, the H positive, transferring these from the NADH and the FADH2 to form NAD positive and FAD. So it helps transfer those electrons from the donor molecules, which is the NADH and the FADH2, to the NAD positive and the FAD positive, which is what happens after that is transferred. So these go from the donor molecules to the receptor molecules. The energy that's released as electrons is used to pump those ions to this process. So it pumps those ions across the inner mitochondrial membrane they accumulate as potential energy, or the proton motive force. Then as that reaches the potential energy max, it's pushed into the ATP synthase. So the ATP synthase is the real energy harvester. That actually takes you through the process, and the original glucose forms 10 NADH molecules and 2 FADH2 molecules, which you end up with 34 ATP molecules. Or 3 ATP molecules for 1 NADH molecule, times 10 of those NADH molecules means 30 ATP from that process. Then 2 ATP per 1 FADH2 molecule times 2 of those gives you that extra 4 ATP. So this process of just 6 glucose molecules going through glycolysis, the intermediate step, the Krebs cycle, the electron transport chain, and then over to the actual ATP synthase will give you 34 molecules of ATP. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense now that you can see it kind of physically, and hopefully you guys like the video. Have a good night and good luck.